Welcome to the Week 1 episode of the Sprocketnoggins podcast. On today's episode, Kickoff. What went well, what didn't go so well, and what did we learn? Following that, a prototype based on a drawing from MS Paint, and where we think we might be headed next. But before we can get into that, introducing your hosts, Eli and Alan.
Yippee-ki-yay! Okay. Welcome to the Sprocketnoggins podcast. I'm your host, Alan, and this is my compatriot,
Eli.
Okay, so what do we think about REEFSCAPE? What are our first impressions this week?
It's definitely a difficult game, guys.
It's difficult to
The last couple of years has been very simple, but this is a challenge. It's a challenge.
The game itself,
there's a lot going on.
It's not overly complex. It's just to make a robot that can do everything in an effective manner is a bit more complicated than it has been in previous years.
Indeed. Now, what are our first thoughts? Coral or algae, or both?
The famous saying goes,
Coral.
Coral wins qualifiers, but algae as well wins playoffs.
Alan, who said that?
As said by someone on Chief Delphi.
Quote random dude on Chief Delphi.
Was that you, Jack? Did you say that?
No, I didn't say that. I did not originate that quote. Moving on, we also have two very special guests joining us today. You might know them on Chief Delphi as the illustrious Nova Gear and Gavin Zero. Welcome on in.
Yippee-ki-yay!
Oh my!
Who do you think you are?
Hello.
Bud?
So what do you guys think? What are we thinking?
About the same. This game's too difficult. I don't like it. All the robots are gonna look ugly because they have too much going on. Everyone's gonna build a Madtown hack robot.
Kickoff.
Let's dive into it.
It was a week ago. It's hard to believe.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Let's dive
It was
into
like a
way
it.
lifetime
more.
ago.
Yeah. I've been dreaming about every day is turned in instead of like a 12-hour day, it's turned into a 24-hour day because I dream of robotics. I dream.
No, it's because you didn't get any sleep.
Alan,
Yeah, I
you need
only
to go
got
to
12
bed
hours,
for it to become a
beauty sleep
12-hour day, right? You know that, right?
Wow.
I usually get my 14 on the weekends, but I wasn't able to today.
Oh, okay.
So
But
I was
anyways,
super tired.
Okay, so back on topic. What went well? What did we like about Kickoff?
Do you want to go first, Eli?
nah, you can go first.
Our productivity right at kickoff was fantastic. Everyone instantly got in and started doing. There was no lagging or lollygagging. Everybody was engaged and gone. Prototypes were being made. CAD was being CAD'ed. Discussions were being had. Arguments were arguing. And
Wow.
everything was just going fantastically. People were reading rules. I ain't never heard of that before.
Yeah, we all got on the same page about what the game was within an hour of getting back to the shop from the a live event, and I thought that was pretty great.
For being such an involved game, it actually was pretty impressive. That was probably the best part of Kickoff was how quickly everyone got all the rules.
If our ability,
And our entire season.
our
so
entire season would be crazy.
So far.
Yeah, everyone was really I think hyped this year. I think we were all really ready for the season to begin. After it got through the rules and we started to actually have to think about the robot, it started falling off a ledge a little bit this week.
Yeah.
I think it was definitely more engaging than productive, but it was definitely both. And
but you need both.
That's mainly what we were going for. We wanted people to stick around and
Show up.
have a good time.
That's all you can really ask for at the beginning of it, right?
Well, yeah, it's kickoff.
And it's really
You're
good
not-
for the younger students to actually have their voice heard and feel like their thoughts are good, because it helps drive in what robotics is, which is learning.
Exactly.
First
it gives
is-
everyone involvement.
Say it with me, guys. First is more than robots.
Exactly. First is more than robots. I have that poster in my room
Yeah, I know. I've seen it.
Wow.
because they were giving it away at Worlds, but yeah.
Incredible.
Thanks, Alan.
Very intriguing.
So Gavin, can you get into sort of what you did with the whole trendy chart of like the dreams, the wants and the needs, because you really led that charge in terms of categorizing our thinking.
Yeah, so we needed some direction after everyone read the rules. So I think a lot of teams do this. I saw it in a few Chief Delphi threads, but we wrote a list on the whiteboard of things we needed to have, things we wanted to have, and things we dreamt of having. If I did it again, I probably would have made it like nice to have instead of dreams, because I don't really want to imply that certain stuff is way more difficult, because it's all doable.
Yeah.
But that one pretty good. Basically, everyone just kind of stood around, and we went through and created a list for all of that. Yeah, that's on our Chief Delphi thread, and honestly, it's been pretty static throughout the rest of our season. There's only a few minor changes I think we've made to that generally. So that was pretty good, because it gave people a lot of direction as soon as we got out of rules.
Oh yeah, that's an additional note for anyone listening. If you want to, the best way to listen is probably following along with our thread at the same time, because we'll be referring to stuff as well. But, if you're not looking at it, that's also not a problem. I think you'll be able to follow everything just as well. But back to what we were talking about.
Gavin?
Gavin, I think you're still
I'm
up.
done.
Oh.
No.
Okay, so next do we want to get into some of the fun things that you were leading, Jack, with that group that you were working on a bunch of ideas with?
Yeah, so we effectively did a pretty similar thing of, alright, what do we want to focus on first? And the first thing we thought of was basically affecting our end effector into like how getting it from like the coral station to the reef and possibly it into the processor. So if you look at our Open Alliance thread, you can see there's a few animations there about movement. Like, I believe there's an elevator, a Z-lift theory, and then finally, what was it? I need to remember that.
Yeah, then you had some stuff about Climber as well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so we also did a lot of climber thinking. Our first idea was actually a drive-in, I believe, as we described it in there, where basically in the center of our robot we would push up and that would give us lift, and we could put in and if it was in the center of mass, it wouldn't have any wiggle wobble, any of that stuff, all clean and nice, So, yeah, I would say it's pretty productive. Have a bunch of younger students who made really good suggestions, in my personal opinion. And with a little bit of work on the ideas, we did pretty good.
That's good to hear. So, next maybe, Alan, if you want to get into what the group that you were working with was doing on Kickoff.
Kickoff. Oh,
As
yeah,
well.
I think back to this. It's been a minute.
It was the start of prototyping on.
Oh yeah.
Was it the
We were
wheels?
prototyping an intake mechanism / grabber arm. We were seeing how well regular compliant rollers gripped and yanked the coral. We wanted to see if it was. We figured out a couple things like having to recenter the coral. That you can't just have like one wheel or two wheel. You have to either space them out or have a stack of wheels, or the wheel will get stuck inside and the coral will just sit there. And we talked about design elements, how we want to incorporate those findings in. So like if you look at our thread, you can see that the whiteboard drawing with the ball and the coral and the V intake, as we called it. that was our first idea, to center the coral and get it to a holding cell. And yeah.
Okay, so from there, I think we want to get into our second topic of tonight.
Week 1.
Alan, you made a drawing in MS Paint and then adapted it into a prototype. Now, a lot of people talk a lot about CAD, talk a lot about how great it is. Well, I don't know. I think MS Paint's the meta in terms of FRC design.
That's what I'm saying. MS Paint is just the real. It's the CAD. CAD is for boys. MS Paint, that is for men, right? So, so real ones use MS Paint because CAD, that's got too many buttons. I was doing it during my tutorial, and I didn't want to have to open CAD and get confused, so I'll just throw this together in MS Paint so I can think about it later. Because for a lot of the time for prototyping, I like just having a rough drawing before CADing it. I like CADing after the first iteration of the prototype, so we have
A rough draft.
so we have a physical element we can feel before we CAD it. So that's why I made the MS Paint drawing, so I can just get a...
It looks like, Jack, do you have something to say about this?
Yeah, you have something to say about this?
Yeah, I actually do, my man, because, buddy, they literally have the same tools! Like...
No.
Yes, they do!
So yes, they have...
Wait, what tools did you use for your drawing?
Guys.
What tools did you use?
You should.
Tell me.
Square tool and circle tool.
Guess what? CAD has lines, rectangles, and squares. You originally press R, rectangle, and C for circle.
It's the same.
Y'all,
No, it doesn't have the same feel.
think most of you are getting a little too heated over
doesn't have the same
tools
feel.
and
It doesn't have the same feel. It's the same as me taking a pad of paper. I actually drew this on a pad of paper before I did it on paint.
Why did you do it on
The
paint?
Like, can
So
you
I could
animate it?
so I could read what I was writing.
Like, can you animate it? Can you?
I don't care. I don't care if it's animated. I just need to be able to see it. I need to. It's not about being accurate. It's about the feel of the object.
The vibe.
Why did I say
I just need
accuracy?
a rough. I need to take out of my brain and put it on. And I'm faster at MS Paint than at CAD. So if I just take I can load up MS Paint, circle tool, square tool, and draw it up and be like,
You can't
that's
just
how I want it.
diss CAD like that.
Yeah, so what ended up happening with this prototype in the later stages? Now, let's get into sort of like
The actual important part.
what this actually happened in terms of a pipeline here.
We took it from that and decided to we removed the holding cell, so we just had the V part of the intake. Is the MS Paint drawing is pretty much the exact same thing as I drew on the whiteboard. It is the exact same thing I drew on the whiteboard, just with a couple changes for thought.
And so what did we learn from the prototype? Like, what were we able to test with that?
We were able to test the compression of the springs. We wanted to use a spring loaded intake to pick up coral and the algae. So we would have it the size of a coral, and then it would open up to an algae as you intake. Which our springs were not strong enough to actually hold them. We need to put way more tension on our strings. Right? But we figured out a couple things from that. Especially the sizing between the coral and the arm length. That the arm length has to be real small if you're picking up the coral vertically. So we started changing. We drilled holes. Swiss cheese the piece of wood, and we just moved the arms how we wanted it, right? So we could get less and more compression to see which works best. And I didn't want the arm to flex too far outward because of the ball. So at first I put my leg in between it, but then that's an ouchie boo boo moment. So I used a piece of wood instead, stacked on 2 other pieces of wood.
Wow.
And it shattered the testing arm. So we learned that it's gonna have a lot of stress on that arm, however we make it. So we have to be ready to deal with those stresses, which is probably gonna happen because it's probably not gonna be made of plywood. I'd be very, very concerned about our team if our main mechanism is made out of plywood, like bad plywood.
It could be done. It could be done.
It could be done. I hope it's not made out of the plywood I cut.
I think you're going on a
it was
bit of a tangent.
half the width that it should have been because I accidentally shot out the back with a spade bit and splintered the entire back off. So that's what really made it rip off. But yeah.
Okay, so getting into our most recent post, so like how is the rest of the later part of the week going? Like what have we really learned and what's developed from here?
So I think there's just been a lot of debate about the entire architecture of the robot because it's just such a difficult game, and like the problem is the strategy is hard enough to predict that you want to be able to do as much as you can before you know what it is so that you can adapt to whatever the strategy is going to be. And it's like at the beginning of the season, one of the reasons the first thing we prototyped was that V thing was because we thought a ground intake, or at least I did. I was very adamant that would be super important. But there's been a lot of debate going on about that. So a lot of stuff like that. We've been working out the kinks and doing more prototyping on various mechanisms like that. Like we tried out a few different end effector designs. Alan can probably talk about some of those a bit. And yeah, it's just generally a lot of people have been working through a lot of different robot designs in their head, and we haven't really settled on one.
So a couple of the end effectors we tried had some very promising results. Like the finger design, it was one I made. I really like it. It's probably because I like it because I made it. It's just I forget which team I took some inspiration from, because me and Eli were talking about a finger.
Yeah.
And then Nick brought up this team that put a roller on a finger, and that blew my mind. Right? So then we made it. It was a piece of... It was just a finger and a roller on top to suck in the coral, and then hold it, and then you can knock it out onto the reef, and then you can run the intake roller underneath the ball to kick it out. That one had promise. We did a slurper design like Ninja Nerds has made, where it grabs the ball really hard. That has a lot of merit.
It's looking very promising compared to some of our other
That one's
attempts.
looking very promising.
Yeah, so the things we want to consider in picking those is like, obviously like the slurper design is just more versatile, and especially since we don't know the strategy, it seems like that would be like a nicer end effector, since even if we don't plan on picking up algae with the end effector, we have the option to in case something changes and we need to like score it in the net or something crazy.
Yeah.
But obviously the finger design is going to be a lot lighter, so it's just a kind of a trade-off.
I have a question for y'all. What is your guys' opinion on the going in net versus going in processor debate?
It's processor.
The staunch net advocates over at Spectrum argue that it's going to be way more important the later on in the season it gets. Because they're saying like, oh, the main defense strategy is going to be going to the other side and stealing it. and then scoring it in your own net for like an 8-point differential. But I'm not convinced, and they currently seem to be the only ones arguing heavily for the net.
In order for the processor to like not be better, the human players would just have to be like. I guess if the human players are like cracked, yeah, but they're not going to be. They're human players. Like
a lot of people have tested the shot and found it to be really easy.
Yeah, but they're still human players. Like they're gonna find a way to miss.
It's gonna be like 80%, especially in playoffs though, because that's where they were talking about how it matters the most in like playoffs and stuff when co-op points and all that doesn't matter. And the human players there are going to be at least like 80%, probably a lot higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially until the last few.
3-stage, we're looking at the team Scream 4522. I don't know, world champions last year. You may have heard them. We also tried making their design of their intake.
It fell apart.
Or end effector. It did not go well.
Well, to be fair, Alan, you did try to eyeball like that entire thing, so.
Well,
Yeah, let's be fair.
I know.
Let's be
Actually,
fair.
no. That one I measured so much more than the finger. I spent so much more time
but like
studying and
unlike the finger, it actually has to be like kind of close.
The finger had to be really close.
Yeah.
This one, okay, in
Sure, buddy.
The difference is it fell apart.
I think
we ran it once and it just disassembled itself.
It's because
like it was made out of Legos.
Well, we did assemble it
So-
out of extremely like poor quality plywood. Like it wasn't.
We did make it out of poor quality plywood.
You also
and,
had like. Why did you have the rollers on the inside in that prototype? That was a question I meant to ask.
Because I had the rollers on the I was planning on having them on the outside, but the type of wood we used, I told someone else to make the arms as I made the base, and the type of wood that was used was thicker than I thought it was going to be. So then I replanned for that and changed the. It's different. It's not. It's a fantastic end effector, and their entire bot is crazy.
I know. I've seen
Screams is. Have you looked at the CAD?
Oh yeah, actually, I was looking at it with Nick earlier today.
Yeah, it's actually wild.
Defense.
Like the architecture and the compactness of that is just crazy, and the way they designed it to have no motors on their end effector is also wild.
It's almost as if they're world champions.
Wow.
Oh.
We love you, Team Scream. We love you, Team Scream. Especially Scream Jr. We love you even more.
Wait, why do we like Scream?
Hey, I'm not one to pick favorites.
We all know.
Yeah, but it's Team Scream Jr. The lore between those two teams is just incredible.
What?
Oh, you haven't seen the things where, like, Scream Jr. will defeat Scream in, like, finals at some of their events? It's incredible.
Wow.
The sibling rivalry. Okay, moving on. What are we currently thinking in terms of climb?
I feel like this is a me section, since I've not heard much climbing outside of what I've been doing. So, I mean, unless anyone else has been doing anything.
I was talking about it with Nick a bit, but you can go first.
Yeah, so the two current ideas is, what I was describing earlier, was either doing a drive-in where it's in our center, which, to be honest, I do like it. It's just really cumbersome for our volume, as you have to have the volume inside, or the cage inside your robot, which can cause problems like damaging components, taking up just space. Yes?
What kind of driving are you thinking? Would it be a push-up like Penn State had in their RA3D?
Yes, I believe that would be it. If I'm remembering correctly, Just goes up like half an inch,
Yeah.
It's
Where
simple.
It pushes on the bottom of the cage?
Yeah.
Wasn't Penn State
like Penn State?
Wasn't
Okay.
Penn
Exactly,
State the one with
yes.
like a hole in the middle of their robot for their
You don't need a
RF3D?
hole if you want like like a good clearance, and like if you want like 6 inches above the ground, you would, but you don't need that.
That'd be
But
sick,
anyways,
though.
the main idea, I believe, is we're going to put a climber as in our crayon CAD. Our main idea currently is like having a big arm thingamabob. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I would have.
Like the Quokka's RA3D, the one that looked like last year's robot.
Yeah. Basically, having a climber in the center bit where it hooks onto some of the rods, the side rods, and then has a little end thing that holds onto a thing, or the bottom of the cage. Then your arm just pulls into your bot, which then shifts the chain. Eventually, if we know where our center of mass is, we can figure out how far we want to go to get the carabiner on the chain above our center of mass to have it not wobble at all, because, that's how center of masses work. And we should have a few inches off, or a few inches of clearance, which would be nice. However, it might be complicated. We'll add more mass to the arm, and we'll actually have to do it, which might be hard.
Yeah, so I think the most main robot idea right now is like a 3-jointed arm, and then basically we just have like the first pivot on the arm, like the Quokka's bot, where we just have something on the back that can hook into it, and we just have it on a powerful enough motor and gear ratio where we can just kind of pull down and use that. Because the thing with the other designs is they just they require so much space in the robot compared to the Quokka's thing. It's like if we're already going to be doing an arm, it's not that much more work to throw that in.
Exactly.
Which right now it is leaning more towards we're going to do an arm than an elevator, from what I could tell.
Yeah, our team has a lot more experience with arms in general.
Yes.
Not that we have experience in 3-jointed arms, but we'll just have to figure it out.
It's only one more joint. It can't be that hard, right?
Don't say that.
Okay, speaking of difficult things like that, Gavin, can you give us a little bit of an update on what's been going on with the programmers so far this season?
Yeah, so we've basically just been waiting for most of the libraries to come out, but the general plan, we one of our mentors designed these camera mounts that hook directly onto MaxSwerve modules, and so we're going to be using a lot of our vision system from last year for localization, and probably just putting cameras. We expect to pitch them about 10 degrees up, and as well as one on the back to look at those weird high up April tags that they angled down for some reason. And that's probably going to be our localization setup. Anything else, we're planning on using Choreo for pathing. We still need to do a bit more testing with that, but we think it just looks a bit more clean than Path Planner this year. And the other main thing is, if we were planning on having a ground intake, a big question would be do we want to localize the coral that's dropped onto the ground? But the problem is that's kind of an extremely difficult piece to localize, especially in 3D, just because it's such a weird object. There's not really corners or anything on it you can detect, so the only real routes you can go are a stereo camera or a LiDAR scanner or something like that. So currently the main thought was between, if we do have a ground intake, because this is a big commitment. If we don't, it's a waste of time. If we have a ground intake, we'd either get a Z camera, a Z stereo camera, and use the APIs that come with that in order to detect it and then localize in 3D the coral on the ground, or we'd get an Orbeck camera, which is a company we just found looking around. The difference is the Z camera is just passive, meaning it only uses the stereo camera to determine the depth, while the Orbeck uses stereo and other sensors like an IR projector. But it's not as commonly used in FRC. I've never seen anyone use it. So that's the current thought between those two. And the advantage of localizing them is just that both in Teleop and in Auton, you'd be able to just toss them on the floor and then drive into them, which would be an especially unique and time-saving element if we were able to do that in Auton, which is why it was something I was a little more dedicated to. But it all hinges on whether or not we're going to have a ground intake.
Okay, so I've got a couple other things to get into. So we've seen in the team updates some minor changes. going on, especially with algae, with the tolerances being limited, which I think is a good thing. And it has been clarified the differences between the two versions, the crosshatches and the clamshell versions. And I just want to know, what are we thinking so far with those in terms of only seeing the crosshatch design at official events, it would seem, at this time?
It's interesting because all the teams that got ladled with the seashell design, like our initial kit of parts only had the seashell design. It didn't have a crosshatch design. When we ordered more is when we got a mixture of both crosshatch and seashell.
And so, just adding on to that, of the 8,000 algae produced for the kit of parts, about 7,000 of them were clamshell and only 800 were crosshatch, which is like a pretty big ratio of game pieces that aren't actually the ones that we're going to see on real fields.
Which is lovely.
Whereas if you look at like what Andy Mark has, it's about 15,000 crosshatch, 5,000 clamshell. Whereas playing fields are 100% crosshatch. So what you see is there's definitely a weird imbalance there, and I want to just point out we're not blaming First for this. We're definitely not blaming Andy Mark for this, because this is more of it seems like a larger issue with the manufacturer specifically. It's a bit of an unfortunate situation, but hopefully there won't be that much of a difference between the two in terms of teams testing. But I imagine there are going to be a lot of headaches as teams try and figure out how to get more of these crosshatch ones if they didn't get them in the kit of parts, and just trying to get their orders in from Andy Mark.
Yeah, I feel like once you get your next order and you're fine. It's whatever. Like most teams they're going to be able to order another ball. It's annoying that it happened, but it's not too hard to deal with for individual teams.
Yeah, and they handled it well. They released the different specifications and stuff. I think you can get them to act similar.
Yeah. I think First has handled the situation incredibly well. They're definitely, I think, the transparency is really great to see.
Something interesting. We already have one with a hole in it.
Well, I think that was just us throwing the balls around, and then it just unfortunately getting popped.
No, it was before that. We weren't throwing this one around. I don't think it came out. It was probably because we filled it up back in our machine shop.
Hey,
that's probably the reason why it got a hole in it. We haven't tried.
Alan, I'm pretty sure we're the ones who ended up popping it. I don't think that was manufacturer.
No, it wasn't popped. There's a very small hole in it. I don't know where it is. When we filled it up, the tolerance is plus minus 0.5 from 16, so we filled up some to a diameter of 15.5 and some to 16.5. We filled this one to 15.5 or 16.5, and within an hour, we checked on it again to test our prototype. I grabbed the 16.5 one, thinking it was a 15.5, and I looked at it was marked 16.5, or 16.5. I was like, this looks real deflated. So I filled it back up thinking we marked it wrong, or used our marker wrong, and we came back and it was still deflated. So we're gonna have to see how that one popped, or how that one got a hole in it. Because if we see this on field, I think that's going to be difficult for teams. Because during, while testing, one of our students figured out that the minimum tolerance ones, the 15.5s, don't actually stand on the coral. The algae doesn't stay on the coral how you set it up for odd time. It won't bounce on the coral, which is interesting to see.
But I believe if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, that those aren't within the tolerance anymore.
Oh, I might have missed
yeah,
that.
I think. So now the each algae is 16 and a quarter inch with a quarter inch tolerance. So the smallest one you'd see is 16 inch, and the largest one you'd see is 16 and a half. But that was after we initially discovered that, though. So it's good to see that change.
Yes. Because if they kept it like that, it would have been devastating.
It would have been fine.
It would have been fine. They would have just not used that one. But it's very nice that First is very clear and open about what's happening with the tolerance. It's really nice that they tighten up those tolerances.
How do you guys feel?
You know, we don't say this very often, but good job, First.
Wow.
We see that
Good
decently
job.
often.
I was gonna say, I feel like I've heard you.
Do we,
say,
though?
yeah, honestly.
Some other controls things to mention. We plan on using Advantage Kit Replay this year, and Michael has been working a bit with some of the people with Photon Vision. Actually, no. Bear with me.
Just noting, Michael is one of our other programmers.
Yeah. There's a few things he's doing with Photon Vision. I think Matt was working on something. I like calling it Ultra Tag 2, but basically he's just doing what we predict is the same thing Mega Tag 2 is doing. It's an experimental feature where he's like rewrote solve PNP to constrain on the gyro's yaw axes, and it gave results that were very good at faraway tags, similar to Mega Tag 2. So that's something experimental, but we're hoping it works out, because then we could add it and it'd be cool. And the other thing is Michael is working with some people in the Photon Vision Discord to make like NVIDIA GPU April tag detection. And I think he got it working to a point where it was like about twice as fast. It was like 80 FPS at 1080p. I don't know if that's... I don't really know the status on that, but yeah, that's something cool.
Okay, and so with that, we conclude our episode of the week 1 episode of the Sprocketnoggins podcast. It's been great having you all here, and we will see you next Sunday.